Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're having a good day. My name is Namisha Pradhan, and I'm an associate with an trade organization called US India Strategic Partnership Forum. The introduction is very well in the name itself. Um, I am very honored to be invited here by the World Woman Davos Agenda. I am, as I look at trade, I don't think, while I look at the US India angle, I cannot ignore Africa. One cannot ignore the entire continent of Africa, which is so involved in any and every aspect of trade. And I'm here to call upon the panel for the next session. I welcome the Africa Equality Moonshot. Africa is home to boundless innovation, resilience, and culture. And this isn't just about progress, it's about transformative leaps towards equity and opportunity. With the youngest population in the world with limitless talent, Africa's potential is absolutely undeniable. Today's panel is here just to inspire just that, big ideas for brighter future. I'll just hand over the mic to Alice Usanase, who's the moderator for today and who heads the country relations and equity mobilization vertical for the Africa Finance Corporation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you with us this afternoon. We know it's been a long week, long day. So we're very grateful for the survivors that are keen to join our session. Nevertheless, I think this is going to be one of the most eclectic engagement we have, given the phenomenal, diverse panel we have today. So maybe to kick off the panel session, I'll share a few data points that I think most of us are very familiar with. When it comes to economic participation and opportunity, in Africa particularly, women make up to 58% of the informal economy. The Middle East, which is the lowest number, has 28%. Europe, 84%. USA, 81%. And Asia, it varies between the East and the West. Those numbers start varying the more you go in under subsectors. When it comes to digital inclusion, only 22 women in Africa has access to internet. In Europe is 89. Asia 54, and Middle East is 41%. If there's one category that women seems to be really doing very badly across the globe, is obviously access to funding. If you look at the women-led startups, only 7% of VC funding go to women-led startups. Middle East, 6%, and slightly better in Europe, which is 11%, Asia 13%, and USA 16% of VC funding. So at least if there's one commonality women have across the globe, is the lack of access to capital. So with that said, I would like to welcome my panel on the stage. We're not going to change the world in the next 45 seconds, but hopefully with the diversity we have, we can share some knowledge and tips that we can go back home in our respective industry and hopefully try to make the women case a little bit better. I will start with welcoming Candace Kelly. She joins us on the stage. Martha Saavedra. And Charity Ekezi. Just for the interest of time, I hope we rather use their experiences and knowledge rather than going through their biography. Thank you. Yes, great. Candace, I will start with you. Stella has done phenomenal work across the globe, and particularly more recently, increasingly in Africa. And I think with such global operation, there's a lot of close regional learning that tend to come with it. So particularly when it comes to financial inclusion, which really cover also access to capital. One of the emerging regions that has been quite achieving a lot of success is Asia, with more than 71% of financial inclusion. From your operation in that region and in Africa, taking into account that the continent has about 54, 55 countries, what has been some of your learning points in terms of pushing women to be much more financially included?
Yeah, so thank you for that question and thank you for being here. I think, regardless of region, blockchain and open systems are a way to reduce the barriers to entry. There's a lot of ways that people can have access without having to have a bank account. And there are fewer intermediaries, there are fewer fees, and so all of those things help. And I think the other piece is when you look at something, when you're using stablecoins, so dollar-backed tokens that can be transacted cross-border, it opens up a lot of opportunity. So a lot of women may, like we've seen women who've been in agriculture, but because they now have access to being paid and by people outside of their country, outside of their community, and then they can cash out in their local currency, it's creating the opportunity for wealth generation at home and for expanding their ability to use their talents beyond their local communities.
And to be just a bit more specific, one of the things that has really driven financial inclusion in Africa is mobile money. Can you tell us a little bit more from your experience and if that differs from countries to countries?
Yeah, obviously Africa has been with M-Pesa and other, has been really a leader in mobile money, and that's fantastic. But I think blockchain can take that to the next level, right? Because of that cross-border nature, you can have fast, secure payments. There are fewer intermediaries, so I think M-Pesa still has some pretty serious fee situation that particularly with micropayments, right? You shouldn't have to have big fees, and if you're transacting on a blockchain like the Stellar network where you can do 100,000 transactions for less than a penny, that helps reduce the intermediation, the fees. Again, it brings that dollar-backed token, so it can take care of some of the issues of volatility in currency, in local currency. It adds security, and so I think that the blockchain, and it also you don't have to have a bank account. You don't have to have a local bank account. You don't have to physically go to a location where there's a bank, which I think is a big issue in a lot of emerging markets.
So Marta, when we talk about blockchain, one of the fundamental concerns that happens is really the lack of understanding, the lack of knowledge, and lack of education, particularly when it comes to women in that space. From your experience and your understanding of different parts of the continent region, how does the lack of education access really contribute to less women being financially included?
Well, yeah, the lack of education can be huge. I will say that there's a great hunger on the continent to learn these things, and I'm in the higher education space, so that is maybe a smaller number of people, but there are, at Berkeley, for instance, we have the MasterCard Foundation Scholars Program. We bring people to get degrees at Berkeley. They're all doing engineering. They're all doing AI. They're all doing blockchain. Ashesi University in Ghana, if anybody knows of it, all their degrees, it's a liberal arts degree, but all their degrees are computer science and engineering. And I met so many young women doing computer science there. So there are people emerging. I think there's huge issues of fraud everywhere. But if you've ever tried to do international transactions, we bring students from the continent, and we cannot pay the visa fees for people for certain countries because of the concerns about fraud. So somebody is figuring out something that's leading to the fraud that happens, I guess. And then blocking us. So I'm looking maybe to blockchain to help solve some of those transactions. But I do think, I think one of the things that you had mentioned earlier about was the youthful population, and I just want to emphasize that Africa will have, it is the youngest continent, and very soon the vast number of people working in the working age on this planet will be African. So everybody around the planet is going to be relying on Africans to do that work. And if we're not training people, and not all the training will have to be through formal education. There are, so a lot of people pass it forward, and we've had many graduates who, they've taken the whole CS61 computer science course at Berkeley, and they're now training people in Zimbabwe with that course. And so these are people that may not get immediately access to the university. So we have this one young woman, Gloria Tumshabe, who's working at Salesforce now, but she's, even through COVID, was training girls back in Uganda on various aspects of computer science. So I think relying on the youth and to pass it forward, but also, and maybe I'll talk more about this, but actually working with them very carefully and cultivating a sense of give back, transformative leadership, which is something that the MasterCard Foundation is very, very big on. And I don't represent the foundation, but I've been working 12 years on this program that they have, and we have it at Berkeley, but at many other places. So really working with young people. And I will also say, I have to say, football. I work with Soccer Without Borders, and
Yes.
I work in this extracurricular space. And we have this whole program in Uganda, other countries in the United States too. But it's really important with young people to help scaffold ways where they feel safe, but they can learn the skills in a safe environment. And with girls, that's super important, to create safe spaces, something fun to do. And then you layer on these things and build that confidence, was something that everybody was talking about yesterday. So that's an area where you have to build it. It's not just automatic.
Yeah, and particularly on that point, and I like the fact that you emphasize on the computer and science. I mean, already globally, only 35% of girls or women are subscribing the computer science space. So is it like something? Is there things we can do from a policy perspective or from a curriculum perspective to make it much more accessible? Because if in 5 years or in 10 years the continent is going to have the largest pool of labor markets, and with the way blockchain AI is going, we're actually not equipping those young people, and they don't have to go through formal education, as you actually said. What can we do from either a curriculum perspective or a policy perspective to make sure that more women and girls are included in the computer science space?
It has to be intentional, I think. There are definitely policies out there of educational reforms and things, but there's just a lot of issues. Teachers are not paid well, and so not to ignore those. And I could talk all day about some work that I'm familiar with of people working in the education space, K through 12, secondary. But I do think that some of the extracurricular ways, and especially as I was saying, sort of the payback and getting people to sponsor times like weekend even, or out of school opportunities, or with, if you bring them to a soccer match, you have an hour first beforehand where you're teaching them, maybe be teaching them English, but then incorporating some of these other curriculums in there. But the kids pick it up pretty fast too. It's just, I think there also has to be a sense of what I want to say is avoiding corruption and avoiding the sense, making sure that people understand that these skills are to be used in ways that benefit the community. So instilling and cultivating that sense of we're helping the community as a whole, and not to use it for other purposes.
Charity. That being said, I think, especially with the work you've been doing, not just in Africa but globally, social media has completely changed how we consume media, how the world is seen, because something is happening in China and in Nairobi, people are aware of what has happened. Your content reaches millions of people on the continent, and most of them are young people. So how does, from your experience, how does a narrative, particularly about women, seems to be differing versus the African media space versus the media space?
So Africa has always been portrayed in the West as, mostly primitive, poverty-stricken, strife and penury.
Lions running around.
Lions, riding lions, living in the jungle. And then these stories are told by people that are not even African. So sometimes they tell the story based on their own perspective because that's what they expect to see. And those of us in Africa share our stories from our own perspective of living in Africa, talking about our beauty, our culture, our diversity, our brilliance. So the story is definitely like different when it's told in the West and when it's told over here in Africa. And I started creating content around breaking those stereotypes about Africa on my social media, because I was like, done. It's like everything about us out there is so, it's like it doesn't represent us fully. How can you do something and say, oh, Africans don't have shoes and this and that, and then in Africa we're like, but we have shoes, we just prefer walking around barefoot because it connects us with the earth, and then they call it grounding, and then it's now cool. So yeah, African women are also underplayed, because African women are amazing women. Most of these women, if they don't go out to do what they're supposed to do and strive, the community is going to lack. The economy is going to definitely drop, and it's going to show that something is wrong. But nobody is telling our story. So one thing I know for sure is that I believe that we should be allowed to tell our stories from our own point of view, from our own authenticity. We need to be ourselves. We need to share who we are to the world, and let the world let us be and tell our stories ourselves, if that even makes sense. But I feel like we need to tell more of our stories and push it out more to the West. So I always say this. I had an interview and I said that Africa has 0 PR in the West. And people were like, what? I said, yes. If I wanted to know what is going on in the UK right now, or in the US right now, and I'm back home in Nigeria, it's like this. Right at the tip of my fingers, I can just go turn on the TV and I can see what's going on everywhere in the world. Now, where is that same platform over there in the West? How does the West watch us be ourselves, have our like food competitions or like cooking arguments like Nigeria and Ghana and jollof rice issue? And how does the West see our culture, our true self?
On that particular point, right, because one thing is, of course, the continent has made a lot of progress in terms of education, access to information, and modernization, but at the core of it, we're still a very patriarchal society. So with the number of followers you have and the reach you have, also I assume it comes with responsibility. And talking about culture, how do you balance the culture you want to preserve, the authenticity, with also pushing women to be much more modernized, and especially younger people as well?
So I have this, it's all about striking a balance, by the way. It's just knowing how to use the digital media to pass your message, but still preserving our traditional cultural values. I have this video that trended one time. It had almost 60 million views on YouTube. And I was like, in Africa we have this, but we prefer this. Now I probably, yeah. Okay. So in the video I was like, in Africa we have blenders, but we prefer to use mortars. Not that we don't have blenders, but we just prefer to use mortars because it's something that has been passed down to us for generations. We just feel like it's connecting. It's our culture. We can blend anytime we want with the electricity, but why? We just love to pound our pepper. And we also have, I also did one with, in Africa we have, there's so many I did, and the thing just actually went viral. So basically I'm just saying that the digital media and the digital platforms like social media has made it easy for us to be able to share who we are to the world, share our culture without it being diminished or looked down on. And that way I can also still strike the balance by using these platforms to tell people who we are, but then still maintaining my cultural sense. Like in Africa we have gas cookers, but we prefer to use firewood to cook because food tastes great when you cook it in firewood.
It's always that smoke taste.
Yes, food tastes amazing when you cook with firewood. So when I pass up messages like this, people are like, oh, so you're not totally primitive and you don't have stuff. It's just you prefer to use yours. I said, yes, that's exactly what we prefer to do. So yeah, that's how I try to stay balanced.
Candace, one of the things, picking up on what she said, is we have seen that women-led startups, particularly in Africa, actually their performance is above 35% ROI against their peers. And that authenticity is one of the key value. Why do we still see less funding going to them?
If I may, I want to pick up on one thing before
Please
I answer that question.
And you're welcome
yeah.
to pick at any point in it.
So I wanted to just, in terms of the telling stories and the creative wealth in Africa, one of the things that we're really excited about at the Stellar Development Foundation is a joint venture that we just started with Idris Elba. And it's in the pilot stage, but it's a wallet called a Kuna wallet, which we devised this because folks on the continent really have a hard time getting paid. We've done a lot of work in interviewing, and so there are all of these stories and all of this creative content that needs to be pushed out into the world for exactly the reasons you said. But a lot of the platforms, if you have a Ghanaian bank account, they're not going to pay you. And so this wallet allows folks to have a self-custodied wallet. They can have a virtual US bank account. They get paid in US dollar-backed tokens. And then with a partner on the continent, they're able to cash out. And so that's the idea. It's in pilot stage, as I said. But I think that it is really very much, it was, you know, we're a U.S.-based company, so we don't know the situation, but we can go, and that's why we're working with folks who are local. Local folks should be solving local problems, and we just have some technological tools that we want to push out. So circling back to your question about investment in women-owned businesses, I think it's a problem globally. I think in Africa, and in all of the regions that we work in, we have an enterprise fund, so we do make investments. So we come at this from two different angles. One is the investments. Our CEO is a woman. We've always been very focused on that. But we realized that as we kept going, she and I would go to meetings and at the end say, like, this is great, we want to invest in you, but can you work on your diversity? Because we can't change that. But working at the end of the funnel is problematic, right? There's only so much that we can change. We can talk about it, we can, but really working at the ground level and making sure that there is the education, that women do have access to these tools, that they're able to tell their stories, that, oh, you know what, I've found this problem. Women can't pay for things and women don't have a bank account, so I've created a QR code to enable people to have a card that they can go pay for things. Well, how do we make sure that we're empowering those people and so they have the tools? So we also have a lot of programs where we do boot camps and hackathons and work with, partner with universities to try and make sure that this is starting at earlier stages, so digital literacy and exposure, and then also partnering with other organizations that are bigger than we are and that have a focus on empowering women and investing in women.
So Marta, one of the things that Candace just mentioned is really around diversity and inclusion, and we have seen more recently, and probably with the new administration, we are even going to see it more. All the DA initiatives seems that they're being rolled up, particularly from corporates, but even now with the U.S. administration and the government level. How do you see that going to evolve and even expanding more the gender gap?
Well, yeah, we're going to fight against it, I guess. That's one thing. Specifically in the African continent, and this is both in leadership, in political leadership, and then in corporate spaces and educational spaces. I mean, there is definitely gender gaps. You do have women, interestingly enough, in terms of national football federations, Africa had more women who were presidents than I think now Norway does, and maybe I think a couple other countries do. But Africa has had more. Now, you know, sometimes there's particular reasons why particular women get put in there. But I think in leadership in Africa in general, one of the problems is it's a gerontocracy. And even sometimes in terms of women. So there's a contested election that just happened in Namibia, and it's not quite clear, but the woman who won it, it'll be the first time it'll be a president in Namibia. But I don't know if we want to celebrate it so much because it's about this party that's been in charge for a long time, and they're just making sure that I'm old and she's old, so it's not against that so much. But we need the youth leadership. So maybe, like we look at Senegal and there's a young leader there, a man. So where do we get the women? And I want to point to one of your compatriots, one of my favorite people in the world, Patricia Uwezi. So I don't know if you know her. She did an undergraduate degree in Rwanda in engineering, and she came to the United States and to UC Berkeley, and she was part of our program, the MasterCard Foundation Scholars Program there. So she got a master's degree in civil engineering. And I know when she was there, she didn't think she was good enough. She was like, oh, this is hard. And there is definitely educational gaps in terms of what opportunities she had to learn back in Rwanda. So she had to do a bit of catch up. But she had a network partly through, it's partly through the MasterCard Foundation and what we provided her at UC Berkeley. But there was also another organization that provided mentorship, and a bunch of women, a lot of them American women, who basically adopted these young women around the world and helped her through it. And then I was with her when we went to this event and met Paul Kagame. And he just said, when you come back, and you will come back, you're going to work for me. And she did. And then she rose up and became the state minister for infrastructure, building the airport and doing all these other things. She just recently stepped down from that because I think she wants to get a PhD. But her trajectory there, she was the youngest woman in the cabinet. And a woman, and Rwanda is known for having lots of women, but she was a young woman in the cabinet. And I think that the combination of, I mean, she's determined, she's great, she's wonderful, but the combination of having multiple people around her to support her, and like I was saying earlier, scaffolding, and learning skills along the way, whether it's public speaking, whether it's how to sit in a room with a bunch of men who are much older than you, who are not going to listen to you, but still being forceful about how you're going to be able to say, no, this is how we have to build that airport. I think those are that kind of scaffolding. Everybody in this room, and I know we're almost out of time here, but I would just love it if I have a bunch of young people that need mentors, that need people to help coach them along. A lot of them have AI, blockchain types of startups that they're working on. And we also have people, we have journalists, we have lots of journalists. And so I would just love that collective sense of, and you learn a lot. You would learn a lot if you worked with these young people.
And I think that's a call to all women and men in this session today. If this is one thing at most you can do, is to see how we can share our knowledge and experience. And I'm sure Martha can share her details for that. Coming back to you, Charity, one of the things, Rwanda is always mentioned as we have the highest, I'm from Rwanda, highest women participation in the cabinet and in the Senate and leadership. But it also goes back to the context of the country where during the genocide in 1994, quite a significant number of men were wiped away. So women were forced to come into those positions because there's no one else to fill in. That kind of like patriarchal sense of where there's still like a definition of what a woman can do or cannot do. How can we leverage more the digital space, the social media, to actually unlock that stereotypes that women cannot do, be more in leadership position? We have seen, for example, in Senegal, we have a younger administration. But we can see the same for younger, but at the women level. What can we learn from changing the norms of gender perspective using social media?
I mean, social media has really been helpful in terms of starting up activism campaigns that are actually very important to people. Like there was a time we had the hashtag Bring Back Our Girls for Nigerian girls, and it went viral all over the world. Everybody was using that. We have like the hashtag Women in Tech, and of course we need to do more using the digital space, but I feel like now a lot of people should definitely switch to trying to use social media, because everybody, like every young woman, every young girl in this generation gets their information from social media. Really, they would rather trust what News Daddy said on TikTok than what the Western or the regular media or TV station said on TV, because they wouldn't even watch TV anyway. So we can actually capitalize on the fact that every young person right now is on social media to push grassroots activism. We can do a lot. I mean, I am reaching people across the world. Actually, my largest number of following is in the US. I have, on TikTok, I have like over 27% American following. And then we are talking about Canada, Germany, Philippines. And when I pass my message about Africa, they get it over there. So we can leverage on the algorithm, the amazing algorithm of these platforms, to push our messages, to start activism, to start like pushing any digital thing we want to push, like any message we want to pass across these platforms. And trust me, when you make it fun, these young girls will be forced to learn from it and see your story from your point of view as a person experiencing these things and sharing your thoughts and ideas on the platform.
Thank you so much. We are slowly finishing our session. I wanted to check if in the audience, before I share my last concluding remarks, if there is any question. We'll take maybe like 2 to the panelists, and they can respond to all of them. So hopefully you can be able to get some of the perspective we're not able to bring to our conversation.
just want to hear your opinion about the trend with Trump coming here, and also, sorry, the direction is not really into have more girls in the corporate world. So before the trend was, I think, very positive. Now, what do you think would be a positive or negative trend for women in tech, in companies, in corporate world? Just your opinion. Thank you.
I'll give it to Candice.
Yes. So, I think the one thing that we can say about the incoming Trump administration is that it's unpredictable. I think it's very hard to forecast what things will come. I personally think that women in tech is not something that should be affected by any of his policies. I think that companies are hiring people, and women, if they have the tools and they have the opportunities, can perform better or at least the same or better than their male compatriots. So, yeah.
And what I would add to it, and this comes out of an experience we have with the Soccer Without Borders, where we do gender equity there and really working with young girls to get their skills up. But we've also realized we have to pay attention to the boys, and I think that's been a theme here, because I will say that I'm aware that Trump is popular among, at least you can tell me, Charity, if you've seen this, among a certain set of young men across the continent, across the world. He's popular, and some of them like his over masculinity. There are alternative ways of being masculine, and there's a program that Soccer Without Borders has been implementing, coaching boys into men, where they go out and it's older men working with younger men through soccer, training them on a range of skills of how to listen and how to be respectful and how to solve problems without, being a blustering whatever Trump is, and actually raising the community up and feeling good about themselves with it. And so this program is incredibly successful. We've rolled it out in Uganda and Zambia and Malawi, several other countries. And the enthusiasm that the young boys have in this, I think it's not a quick fix. But I think that we have to spend time. I have two sons too. A lot of people have sons here. You have to spend time working with the young boys so that they don't find Trump exciting.
Thank you so much. Just on that, and I know I run out of time, please allow me to take 2 minutes extra. Charity, I wanted you to respond to this question, but maybe from another perspective. I think a few days ago, TikTok was shut down in the US, right? And that's a precedent now is there for the rest of the world. And from our region particularly, there's still that sense of censorship when it comes to journalism and access to information. So what do you think that kind of impact may have now, even in terms of accessing information and even the activism that you mentioned that has in recent time took place on social media? We have seen it in Kenya, we have seen it in Senegal. Yeah, with the Trump administration, the precedent has been created around shutting TikTok. What does it mean for the continent, where other leaders may start using it for their own selfish interest?
I don't know if Africa or Nigeria decides to shut TikTok down, then I'm going to fall on the ground and cry. Because that was one platform that actually made me who I am today. I'm here because of TikTok. I was going through the worst time of my life, and I discovered TikTok in 2020, started creating content, and then, my mood changed, I became a better person, and then I'm here. People discovered me because of TikTok. So I don't think that the African government will want to adopt the same, but I'm just being positive here, I don't know, but I'm like, fingers crossed, I hope they don't. But as a creator, I feel like if it's even shut down anywhere in the world, millions of young girls, young children, people like me, I'm not a child, but I'll also be affected, and it's going to definitely ruin a lot of careers. So let's just keep praying and praying to our ancestors that it stays on.
So sorry, we have run out of the time, but I think the panelists will still be around. If you want to have follow-up questions, we can take it in back. I apologize. I hope you have enjoyed this session. I hope you have learned something, and you take back home and share with your community. Thank you so much for having us.